On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're kicking off another one of our player reviews, and today we're taking a look at Jonas Johansson, his first season in Tampa Bay, as well as what we'll see from him next season. All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Danker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're talking about Jonas Johansson. We're taking a look back on his 2023-24 season, as well as what we expect from him, as well as how much will we see of him next season. Before we grab any of those topics, please, you know the drill. If you've been a listener for a while, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributing audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. You can find more of my work over at boltbythebay.com. So, by the way, I just want to start off by saying I've been having a blast doing these player reviews, going down the list of all the players. And if you're here for Victor Hedman or Steven Stamkos, some of the bigger names, and Nikita Kucherov, of course, Andrei Vasilevskiy, those players will be coming up at the end. So stick around as we go through every single player on this team. We've done Hayden Fleury, Nick Paul, Brandon Hagel, Anthony Cirelli, just to name a few. Go ahead and check those out. So Jonas Johansson I'll start it off by saying this. He was thrown into a very unexpected situation, I think, by everybody. What do you expect when you sign as a backup goaltender to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the offseason? You expect to really just be playing maybe 15 games, maybe a little bit more on that, depending on, what the guy in front of you is doing. But when the guy in front of you gets hurt and he's out for a while, for at least the first 2 months of the season, and you get thrust into the starting position right out of camp with really, not even out of camp, with really before even putting your pads on to play in any drills or anything like that with your teammates, that's a very tough situation. And I said it then that, if the Lightning got off to a slow start and he wasn't able to help them out, nobody could have really blamed him at that point in time. And it was really going to be the responsibility of the rest of the team to go out there and help him get through those games, because yes, Jonas Johansson has been in the league for quite some time now, but when you look at what his NHL tenure has been like, it's not exactly like he's been the starter for multiple teams and all that. But really what it comes down to it, and you look at his field of work and really how he played this year in the opening stages of the NHL season, you have to be pretty excited for what you got. Through those first couple of weeks where the Lightning were really through the first 20 games that the Lightning were through without Andrei Vasilevskiy, as a whole, were 9-6-5. Their plus minus was just in the negatives. So, you got to kind of take it as it is at that point in time when you have JoJo as your starter and you have Matt Tompkin as your backup, who I will say both of these guys played phenomenally for kind of the expectations versus really what the reality was. And you know, to see that was, I think, really a nice story within itself. But staying on the topic of JoJo, you know, through 17 games that he played to start the season, as you remember, Vasilevskiy came back on Black Friday. He went 8-4-5. His save percentage was .894. But the thing that really impressed me, and I have to say these were probably the most fun I've had watching a non-superstar goaltender, was the games in which he had the shutouts. And I have to say, early on in the season, I mean, he really rose to the occasion. And I even said at the time, and maybe I definitely got ahead of myself, something that does tend to happen here on Locked On Lightning. But I did say in the time, you know, if he's playing this well, which, yes, 8-4-5 for a career backup thrown into this situation that he was with 2 shutouts, and especially how terrible the Lightning defense was in those first couple of months, I was in the camp of, you know what? Yeah, when Vasilevskiy comes back, that's great, but you don't have to have him come out guns a-blazing right away. You could kind of ease him into the process, whether, you know, you just kind of let these 2 guys share, you know, the starting responsibilities for the time being until Vasilevskiy really gets going. And looking back on it, I kind of jumped the gun on that, but at the same time, for how long it took Vazzy to really get the ball rolling, and I know this is really, really going to warrant a response from a lot of you, or some of you at least. Maybe some of you might agree with me, which has been weird lately to see in the comments that a lot of you have been agreeing with me, which is usually not something that happens quite that often here. But it was good that he didn't share those responsibilities with Vasilevskiy, because if you kind of look back on what he did afterwards, it wasn't really pretty. He had 9 starts, and that's part of it too. Is that he only had 9 starts from really November 28th till March 24th. And that was it. That was all you saw from this guy, which, yes, you know, you got to get that. Once you get to March, you can't play games. But Johansson was 4-3-0. His save percentage dipped a little bit. I will say the goals that he did give up were not good at all. A lot of them were soft goals. I mean, and I'm sure some of you could agree with me when I say that, you know, that he probably made a lot more better saves between those bad goals, because he just had just so much going on in front of him. And when I say that, I mean the bad defense. Not making excuses, but I mean, when you have a guy making 9 starts from November 28th till March 24th, I mean, the fact that he came out on top 4-3-0 with a winning record in those 9 games, and his save percentage is not too far off of 9, I have to say that's pretty impressive. So it's you know, the Lightning continue to get lucky on backup goaltenders continuously. We go from Curtis McElhinney, we go to Brian Elliott, and then we go to Johansson, who looked decent for a backup goaltender, who, like I said, you can't overstate how precarious of a situation he was in to start the year. And he went 12-7-5 with two shutouts. Save percentage was just shade under 90%, excuse me. So, not great, not enough to where it's on the level of what you saw in Boston a couple of years ago. It's not like the Lightning are going to bring home the Jennings Trophy anytime soon, but I think it's comforting, and it should be comforting for a lot of Lightning players, especially, Lightning fans going forward into next season, that you could kind of say that, when Vasilevskiy needs rest, that you're going to have a solid guy out there in net as long as you play solid out in front of him. And he's the kind of goaltender that will help you out in big spots like we saw last season. But in a way, he keeps you honest. You can't fall asleep in front of him like maybe sometimes the Lightning did in front of Vasilevskiy, not only in years past, but this year as well. So let me know in the comments below how you felt about JoJo. Listen, we're not going to sit here and say that he's winning the Vezina anytime soon. But the fact that he could provide ample support from the backup goalie position is very, very good news for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who, like we've talked to exhaustion on this podcast, have issues defensively. And my grade for him, I would say probably a B-, just because, like I said, the level of surprise that he had and we all had to start the season, and how he managed a lot of eyes being on him early on in the beginning of the season. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about how much more of him we are going to see, because I think that's a very realistic question to ask. It's not something, like I said before, that we're going to expect to see, more of him to where we could say that maybe he's splitting responsibilities in net evenly with Vazzy, but I think he has gained himself a little bit of more trust from John Cooper and Corporation. So we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But first, we're going to talk about today's sponsor on the show, and that is our friends over at FanDuel. Now, listen up. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. The Stanley Cup Final is here, ladies and gentlemen. We got Edmonton and we got the Panthers. And now I know a lot of you are saying, or may say, well, guess what? We're going to root against the Panthers because they beat us in the first round. Some of you Lightning fans might say that. But I'm here to tell you that I'm putting my money on this playoff series, this Stanley Cup Final, on the Florida Panthers. Not only because they are the fifth Floridian team in a row to make it to the Stanley Cup Final, but because I believe they are hands down a sure bet to win the Stanley Cup Final. So get in on the action with the Stanley Cup Final at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So as always, I want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give me a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel there. If you want to hit us up on our social media pages, LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram, you could give me a follow on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. And make sure to go follow some more of my work over at boltsbythebay.com. So, like I said, I just gave a glowing review, I think, of Jonas Johansson, his season. There are some things that he needs to figure out and get better at. And I think that for players like him in his position, where he's hasn't really spent a whole lot of time, if any, in the spotlight in his NHL career. I didn't really follow him at all. I knew of him in the league before he came to Tampa Bay. It was mainly when he was with Colorado. But I will say that I'm very confident, just if you just look at his stats, that, it's been kind of an up and down journey for him in his career. And I will say that a player like this, especially after getting so much playing time, and like I said at the end of the last segment, so much attention, because a lot of people, believe it or not, were looking at Tampa Bay, maybe some more than others, hoping that that last season was gonna get off to a terrible start with a goaltender not named Andrei Vasilevskiy in net, and it didn't really go that way. The Lightning were in third place at the time of Vasilevskiy's debut, only 2 points behind Florida, if you would believe that. But now that he played well and he's coming back for another season, I will say that, and I wouldn't be surprised that going into next season that we see a little bit more of kind of confidence in him. I think it's safe to say that, here in Tampa Bay, especially when a player plays well and kind of somewhat exceeds expectations, even by a little bit, we do see them in the following season kind of get a bigger leash. Recent example, honestly, there's been so much turnover in Tampa Bay, I can't really think of one off the top of my head. If I had to go with one, it would probably be, if I'm looking at this Tampa Bay team, it would probably be Darren Radish, honestly. Darren Radish had a decent end to his rookie season in that series against Toronto a couple of years ago. Even though Lightning did lose that series, he played as well as someone who didn't have a lot of time at the NHL level that season as he did. And you saw what happened this year. And I'm not saying, like I said before, and I preface this, and I can't stress this enough, because I'm sure a lot of you will take this, or some of you will take this out of context. But I think that we will see him, Jonas Johansson we will see him get a little bit more time on ice. And I think it's also dependent on really how well Andrei Vasilevskiy plays, and where John Cooper feels comfortable enough to where he could let him run wild, maybe play for a couple of weeks straight, and then also rein him back, especially on those back-to-backs, which we'll definitely see most likely more than not, even if there's a week off or whatever afterwards. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Cooper, especially after what happened a couple of years ago, kind of be a little bit more hesitant to play Vasilevskiy more. Vasilevskiy has really, he's played 60 games 3 times in his career. He's eclipsed 50 games, I would probably say 7 times in his career. And he's going to be 30 this year. And trust me, I'm 32. That's not old. I mean, I will say your body doesn't bounce back, and all my listeners who are over the age of 30 agree with me. Your body doesn't bounce back as well as really when you were, 25, 24. And not saying that that's going to be a factor, but that's definitely going to be something in Cooper's mind, the workload. And I wouldn't be surprised if I had to guess, if I had to put a number on it. And this is also coming off, I would say, a probably very good end to the season, as well as moments in that playoff series against Florida where Vasilevskiy played phenomenally. I wouldn't be surprised if Cooper kind of goes 3 on, 1 off with Vasilevskiy, and you'll start to see more of Johansson. Now, the other side of that, like I said before, it's dependent on Vasilevskiy's performance, but it's also dependent on Jonas Johansson's. Because if you look at kind of like what's waiting down for you in Syracuse in terms of goaltending, this is the guy. This is what you're kind of, I wouldn't say banking on, but the Lightning aren't, if Johansson doesn't play well, it's not like you're going to go to Tompkins. It's not like you're going to go to NFL, which I saw NFL play last summer. I did not think he was ready. Everything going on in the World Championships, did not think he was ready to play. I think he played Austria and he got annihilated in that game. But I will say that really at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised though if the Lightning kind of are quick to kind of look somewhere else for goaltending if it starts out really bad for Johansson. But I don't see that happening. I see a guy who is a career backup, a guy who is hungry to stay in the NHL and will only continue to get better as long as, like I said before, as long as the Lightning play well in front of him. And I think that really, at the end of the day, if I had to put a number on how many starts he gets this season, I would say 20, maybe even 30. I would be shocked if Vasilevskiy gets close to 55. I just don't see John Cooper pushing his guy out for 55 plus games. I think we're going to see a little bit more towards 45, 47 starts out of Vasilevskiy, maybe a couple from Tompkins, maybe even a start here or there from Annafelt. But really at the end of the day, I think that, this is Johansson's spot and he's going to get 15 to 20 maybe. So let me know in the comments below. I mean, is it too much? Is it too little? I don't, especially with the 2-goalie system and yeah, great end to the season with Vasilevskiy. A couple of months off could be a complete reset and we may not see it carry over. And how many of us would be surprised? Let me know in the comments below. So wrapping things up in just a little bit, we're talking about expectations, as we always do with the expectations, with player reviews and all that fun stuff. And we kind of got done kind of just talking about that loosely, or at least started the conversation. And looking at Johansson, and like I said, only 9 starts, only 26 games last year, 9 starts down the road since Vasilevskiy got back. 12, 7, and 5. Not too bad. Majority, obviously, of those games were first 2 months of the year. And I think the important thing for him is just to make the necessary saves, and that's basically the basics. If a regular slap shot here, a regular wrister there, but if David Pastrnak rips one by you, or Austin Matthews just dangles you out of your pads, I don't think anybody would be really just upset about it. It would probably be a little bit more on the other side of it and just be more expected, especially for a guy that may not even play 20 games. And the expectations, though, still are high. I would like to get that save percentage a little higher, maybe 10 points higher, 10 tenths of a higher, up to 9. The goals against average a little lower. If we could get that to maybe 315 I'd be fine. I'd be okay with that. The shutouts, I mean, that's just a random thing. The fact that he got 2 was really pretty impressive, and I still looking at that is pretty, like I said, pretty shocking to see, to say the least, and especially in a league where the scoring is so high and so frequent, and it almost looks like the era of great goaltending where it's just a one-horse stable. The guy goes out there and just, racks up shutouts and low goals against on a nightly basis. The league has gotten better all around. You're seeing it here and there throughout the league. Yeah, there'll be some anomalies here and there from goaltenders maybe you haven't heard of, and maybe that's also part of it too as to why he had those 2 shutouts, because really not a lot of teams have seen him that frequently, so you really can't get a grasp for what his strengths and his weaknesses are. So maybe that does help and work in his favor. But I would really like him, like I said, to make the basic saves, go out there and just have good performances, win or lose. And I think that's really all anybody could ask for out of a backup goaltender. And at the end of the day, it really depends on, how much they throw him out there. Even in games where Vasilevskiy plays bad and he gets pulled, you got to go out there and just figure out how to just keep the fire from spreading. That's all you could ask for. I know it's easier said than done, and I don't think a lot of people understand or realize, how hard it is really being a backup goaltender. It's kind of like being a setup man in the major leagues, or even just a relief pitcher in general, or even a kicker in the NFL. I mean, I could go all day with the analogies, but I think you all get the gist. So I hope you enjoyed this player review. I know it's not too exciting because it's a backup goaltender. As for who we're going to do on tomorrow's episode, you'll have to tune in and find out. But in the meantime, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. Like I said, we're available also on YouTube, so go ahead, subscribe to our channel there. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified and you'll be able to listen. So that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.